Hey sis, apparently society looked nothing like today's setup and black women held the top of the hierarchy. This social setup not only worked, it was respected globally. What happened is the question I know you're probably asking. According to the author Vivian Hunter-HIndrew, also known as Mama Zogbe, and the research she did for her book, the hierarchy was overthrown by a group of bitter colonizers and our own men chasing fool's gold. In my essay, What If I Told You God Was a Black Woman, I shared last week, I introduced some of the key concepts from chapter 1 of the book, The Sibyls, the First Prophetess of Mami Wata. This is by Vivian Hunter-HIndrew, who I will now refer to as Mama Zogbe. We learned as black women that there's evidence to suggest that a lot of what we see, hear, and read in texts such as the Bible, content of religions such as Christianity and especially Catholic religion, has been plagiarized from black women known as the Sibyls. These black women lived and ruled in a period that predates the origins of Christian and Catholic religion and the text we call the Bible, which is key and would support her claims she makes in her work about black women's history being plagiarized and credited to people who had nothing to do with it. As mentioned in my last essay, while I'm not here to dispute the author's work or say if she's right or wrong, I am here to bring to light what this author claims about society, religion, us as women, our history, and black women's overall contribution to humanity. But most importantly, I'm here to highlight, according to this author's research, the position black women held in society before religion, the slave trade, and XY or male patriarchy came along. The first half of chapter 2, which is my focus for this piece, makes some very important claims. Firstly, the Amazons, a group of women, their main job was to defend the matriarchal rule of the Sibyls. Secondly, that the Greeks, we could say white male colonizers, had a dislike for the Amazons and the Sibyl women, which gave them the motivation to kill them off, plagiarize their work and creations as their own, and then lie to the world. These themes will be explored in detail, and if you're listening to this on YouTube, there are timestamps below in the description box. You can skip to whatever part interests you the most. Firstly, the origin of the name Sibyl. If we know from chapter 1, which I wrote about in my previous essay, that the Sibyls were black women of African descent who ruled globally in areas outside of Africa, what's interesting to note from the author's research is that the name Sibyl has very mixed origins. It will and can mean different things depending on the source or who you ask. Two areas that seem to be consistent with the meaning and origin are the actual dictionary itself, such as Merriam-Webster, and the ancient definition confirming the names and meanings and origins. The author asserts that, according to history and research that she did, Sibyl was the title that ancient Africans used. They were prophets and priestesses of the Mami Watas. Now, Mami Wata, according to her, were deities or gods, or we could say goddesses in the female form. The actual name came from black Ethiopians. It was used to address these women as a form of endearment. So in other words, a name used to address these women in the same way that many of us today call older black women auntie, even if we're not blood related, just as a form of respect in today's context. For the ancient Africans, it was spelt differently. It was Cybele. It meant Queen of Heaven or Mother of Gods. The change in spelling for the name, the author credits to the Greeks, and she said it was their form of corruption. They put two words together. So the author writes, combined, it reads as Sibyl, and they spelt it S-I-O, and the second part of the word B-U-L, which phonetically evolved to the English Sibyl we use today. This is from page 24 of the book mentioned. Sibyl back then meant a woman who could tell a fortune, the same as what's defined in the dictionary today. The author claims that it was the bitter Hebrew patriarchs, to use her words exactly, let's just say bitter XY men, who changed the meaning during their plagiarization of the Sibyl's work, ideas and creation. the author asserts that in the texts such as the Bible, they, the black women, were made out to be evil. So she further goes on to write, Conversely, under the bitter Hebrew patriarchs, the Sibyls were condemned in their Bible as meaning evil serpent or spirit or mistress of the python. However, when all is said and done, the Sibyls refer to themselves as sisters of Isis and sometimes prophetesses of the Black Diana. So that's on page 24 of the book. Now, is this believable? We always should critically think about things, especially when such big claims are made about history. That said, the author does provide readers with a very extensive list of references, research, and further text to study. So clearly what she says, the author, and what she asserts must be found somewhere and must hold some kind of truth. Black women or anyone can ask a simple question to see how likely this is to be true when we consider history. We can always ask ourselves, is there any other evidence to suggest that women have been condemned or switched up in history or in the Bible? Of course, the answer is yes. Of course, we do have this evidence all throughout the Bible. It could be argued that that's what religious texts such as the Bible is about, mainly the condemnation of women in favour of male supremacy. For example, Mary Magdalene. She was made out to be a prostitute and a fallen woman. Historians have since disputed this about her. They have said a lot of unsavoury stuff about Lilith, who apparently was the first woman created according to these religions. And the religions and the Bible, they promote the ideology that women are behind men. So it's very easy to see that what Mama Zegbe claims about the Sibyl women could very well be true when we look at how women have been historically portrayed. When black women were defended by the Black Amazons, in the beginning of the second chapter, the biggest takeaway for me is that it reveals that during the reign of the Sibyl women, there was another group of people or women whose job it was to defend the black matriarchy. So they refer to them as the Black Amazons. This is from page 30, and we get to learn a bit about them. According to the author, in Western history, the Black Amazons were mythologized by Europeans. So in other words, they were made out to be unreal or some kind of myth with no real certainty over their actual existence. The reality is, according to the author's research, the name Black Amazon was not actually accidental. According to them, back in the day, Amma meant mother and Zon meant son. These women, they were mothers of the sun and of African descent. Obviously, they were not a European myth. They were also linked to the Ethiopians and also located in what is now known as southern Russia, as well as throughout the globe during this period that is predating biblical times and religion as we know it today. These warrior women had the responsibility for the protection and preservation of the matriarchal rule across the globe. First black women to do things that have been historically credited to white European males. Here we see again plagiarism of black women's contribution to humanity and evolution taken over, rewritten and credited to these bitter patriarchy that the author cited in the opening. The author asserts from her research, if we move through the book onto page 34, the Amazons were known under many names, i.e. the Azones and the Alazones, etc. They were the original shock troops, fighting in defense of the ancient temples and kingdoms of the black matriarchs, which dominated the ancient world. It was the Black Amazons who were the first to domesticate and ride chariots and horses when the Greeks did not. They were the first to employ cavalry, and their superior weaponry was made of iron when the Greeks were still using bronze. So Mama Zegbe, the author, has said a lot in just that little paragraph. Based on what she's saying and based on her research, there was a time where black women worked together to manage society as a whole. There was a clear structure to the black matriarchal rule. Their dominance and rule was global, as the Amazons and also the Sibyls were all over the world. Secondly, she's saying that a lie has been uncovered over the evolution of the mode of transport that was used at the time. She's basically saying black women were the ones riding horses, making defense weapons from better materials such as iron. It was not white males or white Europeans or any other male for that matter. In conclusion, to keep these short, bite-sized essays on key parts of this wonderful book manageable, because it's a lot to take in and it's so much to actually think about, what we can conclude from my first essay, which I shared, which is called What If I Told You God Was a Black Woman? And this essay, which focuses on the first half of the second chapter, are three things. Firstly, there's many reasons to question the validity of the Bible and Christian and Catholic faiths when we take into consideration the research done for this book. Secondly, there's no doubt over whether there was or even is a God. It appears from what this author is saying, the doubt is really about who was considered or should be considered God. Based on her findings, her research, her claims, it would appear it was not the white man that we've all seen descend from the sky. And faith was not based on a text, meaning the Bible, that places women at a back seat or places women in the back seat. Thirdly, if we are to entertain or even, consider the possibility that the author's research and findings are true so far, it would appear that black women had a clear societal structure in place and they work together. This is evidenced by the understanding that the author gives us about who the Amazons were, the mothers of the sun, and who the actual Sibyl women were. The women who were able to fortune tell and the women who had their work and history stolen. The second half of chapter 2 goes on to give more explicit areas where plagiarism by men and religion can be seen, meaning showing where, how, and when males stole from black women, rewrote their history, which includes the Bible, and it also uncovers how the Sibyl women worked as prophetesses with links to some common mythology that we know today, which has also been seen in parts of the Bible. Now, all this is a lot to get into, and I will cover this in the next essay. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening. If you are on YouTube, why not give the video a like, subscribe if you like this kind of content. And if you are on Substack, thank you so much for being here. I will catch you in the next one. Much love, the Black Woman Essayist.